Hey, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be learning Maseches Zevachim two blat, Daf Lamed Beis and Daf Lamed Gimel. Baruch Hashem, these are usually short blat are terrifying, but when they're terrifying in Rishonim. But when you see evenly placed Tosfosim and Rashis, it's not as scary. It just means it's a shorter blat. That's my diuk from the Bavas that sometimes you would see a Tosfos or a Rashbam that would go on for 100 lines. One housekeeping note: I'm going to be heading off to Baltimore tomorrow. Hi, Dad. To pay a shiva call to the Hauer family. Rabbi Hauer was someone who I worked with very closely in my last 5 years in the OU, and I only left there a year ago. Remarkably special person and quite shocking. I also had the opportunity to work together with his Rebbetzin, who is very involved in parenting, and I was running a parenting initiative, so we worked together quite a bit. And the logistics for that parenting thing was with her daughter, Devorah Wallfish, they live here now. And Rabbi Howard would come here every few months, and when he was here, I would be, just go say hello. So certainly a very remarkable person who was in a remarkably important position and was a voice to presidents and countries and
He's a terrific speaker.
yeah, and he's just a very special person. He was one of those people that when he would start talking, everyone else just went quiet, like lo motzasi yafim mishtika, like he had this, there's just a wisdom. The second he started talking, the whole room went quiet. Didn't matter what was going on. Didn't matter who was in the room either. It was pretty remarkable. So I'll be heading out tomorrow morning. I won't be back in time for Daf. I asked Rabbi Handler to pick up from where we're going to leave off tonight. Hopefully he'll also do more than a blot. And then we'll hopefully by the I don't want to. Hopefully by the end of the week we'll catch up. I'm looking for some sanity in this Daf Yomi thing, and I haven't found any of recent. So, okay, here we go. New parak. This parak is called Kol Hapsulin, and we're now going to be talking about the din of who can do shchita. Says the Gemara, Kol Hapsulin sheshachtu. Anyone who's puzzle who did shchita, shchitasan kshera. Seems like from the phraseology of the Mishnah that anyone can do shchita. Let's see who they are. She'ashchita kshera bizarim. If you're a zar, if you're a non-kohen, uvenashim, uve'avadim. Uvitmein, ve'afilu b'kodshei kodshim, even in the highest levels of korbanos, all of these people are eligible to perform the actual shchita. Again, we're only talking now about the actual cut that severs the kana and the veshet, the windpipe and the esophagus. Uvilvad shelo yehu tmein nogin bebasar. But we have a concern. A woman is not tmeya. I mean, unless she's tmeya, but a woman is not tmeya. But a man who is tameh, he cannot touch the basar because it'll be matame, the basar, because it can transfer. So that's the only caveat the Mishnah gives. Leficha. Therefore, it is. It doesn't mean you can't do shchita. That guy can do shchita. Ubilvad, yeah, ubilvad. Well, we'll get there in the Gemara. Ubilvad shelo yihyu tmeyin. If
I don't remember much, but the oddball stuff.
yeah. Exactly right. Lefichach, because they are able to shecht, therefore, hein poslan b'machshava. The din of pigul is not limited to a kohen. To have a machshavas pigul of chutz lizmano is not only for kohanim; it's for anyone who's eligible to do the shchita. And if you'd like to see a Rashi it sounds clean on the surface, but it's actually quite a lumdish Rashi. Rashi at the last one on the page, Dibur Hamaschel lefichach hein poslan. Hein poslan es hakorban ben machshava im shachtuhu b'machshava. Hoel v'ru'uyin la'avoda zu, since they're fitting to do this avoda, therefore, machshavtan machshava. So what that means is that eligibility to do shchita is what generates the capacity to have a machshavas pigul. You can't have a machshavas pigul if you're not eligible. You're just a random at that point. But if you're eligible and you're involved, there isn't within that category only Kohanim can have pigul. No, not only Kohanim can have pigul. Not only non-Tmeim can have pigul. Anyone can have pigul if you're in this category. Very good. Let's continue in the Mishnah. Top of Lamed Beis and Aleph. V'chulan shekiblu es hadam. When we talk about Kabbalah Sadam, and if they did so bekavana of chutz lezman of a chutz lemekomo, but they did so the wrong way. So they did Kabbalah Sadam, but with machshavas pigul. In yesh dam hanefesh, if there's still more blood, and remember what we're talking about. The blood that we need for zrika Has to be dam hanefesh. It has to be the blood that is actively spurting out, not blood that is just flowing out. So it's while there's still enough blood pressure to actually cause that arterial flow, that is dam hanefesh. So if you made this mistake during the Kabbalah Sadam, and the animal is still in the dam hanefesh phase, go back and get more. Yachzor hakosher v'yikabel, go get more blood. Continues the Mishnah. Kibel hakosher v'nasan lepasel. Let's say that a kosher person, he did the Kabbalah Sadam and he gave it to someone who he shouldn't. Yachzor lekosher, give it back to the original guy. Not a psul, but give it back. Kibel biyamino v'nasan bismolo. Let's say the Kohen collects it in the correct hand, his right hand, and then he transfers it to his left. Let's say he feels his muscles are atrophying, it's heavy, whatever the case may be. He switches it to his left, fine, but yachzor liyamino, you have to put it back in your right hand. Kibel bekli kodesh v'nasan lekli chol. Let's say you received it in a holy vessel, and you then poured it into a non-holy vessel. Yachzor lekli kodesh, put it back into the holy one. Nishbach min hakli al haritzba va'asafo. It fell from the kli. Most importantly, it was first in the kli, right? If it went straight from the neck to the ground, that doesn't work. But if you collected it first in a kli and then it spilled, then you collected it, no problem, kosher. Let's say in regards to zrikas adam, nasno al gabe hakevesh, do the zrikas adam in the wrong place. The two sides of the mizbeach that have a yesod, that have a foundation, is the northern side and the eastern side. The northern side and the western side, sorry, the side between the Heichal and the Mizbeach and the northern side. Those two sides have a Yesod. So that's if the Heichal is over here and the Mizbeach is over here. So this side has a Yesod and this side has a Yesod. And there's a little bit on this side, like a small amount over here. But let's say you didn't do that. You only put it on the Kebesh, you put it on the ramp. Or Shelo Keneged HaYesod, somewhere else that wasn't near the Yesod. Or Nasan Esanisnin Lamata Limalan. Or you have a Korban whose blood should have gone below the chut hasikra and you put it above, or the reverse, veshanisnin lemalon lemata, or bloods that you're supposed to put above the chut hasikra, you put it below, veshanisnin bifnim bachutz, veshanisnin bachutz bifnim, or you mix up which mizbech you're using. What kind of amiratus is that? I don't know how you can make such an error. You're either using the mizbech hagadol, which was huge and out in public, or you walked into the heichal by accident. I mean, like that's an incredible error. It's incredible. By the way, that's what Rosh Zalman Auerbach used to say, and the poskim used to say about people who didn't remember what paragraph of Shema they're in. Like when they'd say the word ukshartam, you're like, which paragraph am I in? So Rosh Zalman, I think it was him, said like, how is that possible? I'd be like, it's very possible. I do it all the time. Just by you, it's not possible, but by everybody else, it happens like ma'asim b'chol yom. So by him, it was clear. Just okay. Anyways, they brought the blood to the wrong part of the mizbech. Either what should have been on the outside mizbech, they brought to the inside, or vice versa. Go back.
Someone pointed out a few weeks ago that by shame they were all stupid. So it was.
Yeah.
Who knows who was working?
Correct. Yeah. There was a lot of problems there. That's a very good point. It's probably a Daniel Cantor comment. Yeah. He's a historian a little bit.
Yeah, he is. Right.
Yeah.
That's a great point. So nothing should shock you.
I always nod when he talks like, yeah, of course. Everybody knows that. Good. Okay, third of the way down, the Gemara opens with the diuk. What did our Mishnah open with? Kol hapsulin sheshachto. That's a past tense word. If a puzzle already did the shechita. Now, we're Gemara learners. We know what that means. Says the Gemara, sheshachto. It should say sheshachto, not shachto. That means di'ever in. Only after the fact do we allow psulim to do shchita. But lechatchila lo. That's what's implied. The Mishnah doesn't say kol hapsulin shochtin. It says kol hapsulin sheshachtu. Past tense. So what we imply from there is, yeah, you shouldn't have done it. You're a puzzle. What's wrong with you? But you did it. So the diuk from our Mishnah is that it's only kasher b'di'ever, but lechatchila lo. Says the Gemara or Minu, that's actually not true. Because we actually have Mari Mekomos that are not that way. This is a brisa in Maseches Yuma. The pasuk says v'shachat. I'll read the whole pasuk for you. V'shachat is ben abakar lifnei Hashem v'krivo b'nei Aaron hakohanim es adam. All right, so that's what it's talking about. That's the context. V'shachat shchita bezar kshera. The brisa says black on white that shchita bezar is kosher. Shechita kshera bezarim uvenoshim uve'avadim uvetmei v'afil b'kachay kachim. There's nothing murky here. There's no sheshachtu past tense. It's kasher lechatchila. The Brisa continues, the Brisa from Maseches Yoma continues, oh, Eino Ela B'Kohanim. Maybe you would have thought that Shechita can only happen by a Kohen and not by a apostle. Amris, V'chime Ayin Basa, and you would say, where might I have learned this from? Well, Michlal Shenemar, because it says the following. It says, Ve'ata uvanecha itecha tishmeru es kuhunaschem l'chol dvar mizbech yochol af b'shchita. When it says in the pasuk in Bamidbar that the Kohanim should be careful about everything by the Mizbech, Yochel af b'shchita, perhaps they should also be conscientious to do the shchita. Maybe they're the only ones who are ksher. Talmud lomar v'shachat as ben abakar lifnei Hashem v'hikrivu b'nei Aharon HaKohanim is the rest of the pasuk. So v'shachat is one step, and v'hikrivu is another step. V'hikrivu does not mean shechti. V'hikrivu actually means kabbalas hadam, even though the word doesn't translate that way, but in drasha that is what it means. Mikabala ve'elach, look at that word. Mikabala ve'elach mitzvahs kahuna. That's what v'hikrivu means. We never would have translated the word v'hikrivu that way. It's just saying we have to be clear. Like again, we would never understand halacha if we just read the Bible as it stands. We would not know anything because we're amaratzim. But the word v'hikrivu here means mikabala ve'elach mitzvahs kahuna limed ala shchita sheksher b'chol adam. So the brisa that we have from Maseches Yoma is clear. No lack of clarity from the brisa. It is absolutely kosher lechatchila, nashim, tmeim, avodim, you name it. As long as you're a yid, you're good to go. Fine. We didn't talk about a mumar. We're not talking about a mumar, but the people on the list are good to go. But the Mishnah was framed in a way which was past tense, which means b'diavad in and lechatchila lo. So which one is it? So the Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, you're absolutely right. Hu adin de'afilu lechatchila nami. You're right. Really, the people listed in our Mishnah are allowed to do shchita lechatchila. Umishum de kaboyle misna tmeim. However, there is one person on the list who really should not do shchita at all lechatchila. De lechatchila lo gzeira shema yigu bebasar. Therefore, tanu sheshachto. You're right. Everybody in the Mishnah, with the exception of a tamei, can do shchita lechatchila. A woman can do shchita lechatchila. By the way, the poskim discuss this in Hilchos Shchita and Yoredeya. The poskim discuss about a woman doing shchita, whether lo ra'inu is a raya or lo ra'inu is ainu raya. If we've never seen a woman do a shchita, is that a raya or is that not a raya? So socially, we talk there like, I've never seen a woman do a bris. I've never seen a woman do a shchita. I've never seen. Is that a proof? It's not an academic proof. It's an experiential proof. But the poskim discuss lemaisa. Can a woman do shchita? 2025. Can a woman do shchita? You see, the women's movement is not clamoring to become shochtim. I'm just saying, but they have mar mukomos if they want. Yeah. You're being recorded. I'm already past the line. I'm past the Rubicon myself. If you want to join me, David, you're welcome. I'll even call you by name. So that's what the Gemara's distinction is. It's saying the negative, the past tense language of the Mishnah is referring to a tameh. You're right, a tameh is a din b'diavad, but everybody else is lichatchila.
Are we then also not allowed to be in the Azara where the shechita?
We are going to discuss that. We are going to discuss the fact that a tameh, most of these people can't be there. In Ezra's Kohanim, how do they?
There's the 11 amos.
Correct.
Which I think women still can't be there.
There's Ezra's Yisrael, there's Ezra's Leviah, and then there's Ezra's Kohen. So we'd have to see a map. The Mishnayos and Maseches Tamei come with a beautiful map from the Kahati. I'm sure it's in other places also. We should bring one in and hang one up for Zevachim because it is very practical. But we're going to discuss that actually coming up very soon. So says the Gemara, wait one second. The Tamei diavad shapir Tamei? Is it really okay if a Kohen is a Tamei and he does the Shechita? After all, first of the long lines, Uriminu, we have a brisa, one that we will be learning again in a little bit. V'samach v'shachat, two different psukim, one pasuk in Vayikra, Perek Aleph, one in Perek Aleph, pasuk Dalet, and one in Perek Aleph, pasuk Hey. So they're one pasuk apart. V'samach and v'shachat, ma smicha b'tehorim. The brisa says, just like when we do smicha, which is putting our weight on the animal, that person has to be a tahor. And in order to go into the space where the animals are, therefore, I have to be a tahor, to your point. So the Brisa has this hekesh between samach and shachat to teach me that just like smicha has to be done by a tahor, so too shchita has to be done by a tahor. So the Gemara says that's only a din d'Rabbanan. Midrabbanan. Rashi, midrabanan, shema yigu bebasar. Midrabanan, we restrict. But technically they can still do shchita. You don't have to be a tahor to do shchita. That's the same din as our Mishnah. It's a repeat. So we answered our question, then we asked it and answered it again. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. When it comes to smicha, it says lifnei Hashem, which implies that you have to be tahor and have to be in that space. Shchita nami aksiv lifnei Hashem. It also says lifnei Hashem in the pasuk of shchita as well. Look at, if you have the psukim on the side, look at Vayikra Perak Aleph pasuk Hey. V'shachat es ben habakar lifnei Hashem. So therefore, the Gemara doubles down on its question. The words Lifnei Hashem imply in a holier place. It's not stam. And you're telling me it's midrabanan? The pasuk of Lifnei Hashem is midrabanan. What are you talking about? It sounds like the shochet has to be in that space. Says the Gemara, Emshar David, Sakin Aruka b'shachet. David's memory of Maseches Zevachim. The 10-foot shechita knife. I did. Yes, I did. Because those were all the memes that went around during COVID about bris milah.
Same what? That's the same knife.
Probably.
What handle?
Yeah. This was 6-foot handle because of COVID. You got to stay 6 feet away. So that's what the Gemara says. That really, technically, you could be Lifnei Hashem in the Shechita. The Lifnei Hashem part, the Shechita is done across the line into the Kodesh, into the Azara, whatever room you're in. But the Yid, the Tameh Yid, could be standing in a place where he's allowed to stand. He just has a long knife. No problem at all. Ay smicha nami efshar dema'ayel yodei b'samich. By smicha too, I'll just put my hands across the threshold and push down on the animal. What's the big deal? Why do we say by smicha it has to be lifnei Hashem, you have to be an ishtar, but by shchita we say go get a long knife? So says the Gemara, kasavar, because it seems that the author of this brisa holds bia b'mixas shma bia, that putting even only your hands into the kodesh, it's as though you are in the kodesh. Unlike the shochet, who was completely outside of the kodesh, and he was holding his samurai sword, which was very long. His arms didn't extend over the threshold. His arms and himself were completely inside a non-holy space, and he could do the shechita from there. But smicha, the animal, was over there, so then I had to extend my hands. Now we have a problem, because according to this sheet in the Gemara, bia b'mixas, even the partial insertion of one's hands across the line, across the threshold into that holy space is considered shma bia. It's as if you're in the room. You're not allowed to be in that room. And in fact, you're chayiv kares if you're in that room. So we're not having that. That's the distinction between smicha and shchita. Smicha cannot happen unless part of your body's in that room. Shchita, if you're very talented and have a very long knife, you could figure it out. Okay, great. Now, the problem is that this brisa, we just saw version 1 of this brisa. There's an exact opposite version of this brisa that we have to deal with. 2 lines from the bottom. Rav Chizda masni itcha. Rav Chizda's drasha was the exact opposite from the drasha that we will see again in a page or two. It says v'samach v'shachat. Look, we started out last time. If you compare word for word, the first long line said masmicha b'tahor ma'af shchita b'tahor. Here's the exact opposite. Last 2 lines. Ma shchita b'tahorin, af smicha b'tahorin. So here we see Rav Chizda starting out stark that shchita is the beginning of our hekesh, not smicha. Ma'ishna shchita d'chsiv lifnei Hashem. What is going on with the halacha that shchita says the words lifnei Hashem? Smicha nami ksiv lifnei Hashem. It will answer up all of the natural questions that are coming up here. So says the Gemara, no, don't worry. We can still do smicha from the other room because afshar de ma'al v'samich. I could put my hands across the Rubicon and do shchita that way, and do smicha that way. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Top of Lamed Beis, 2 lines down. Shchita nami. Afshar de avid sakin arucha v'shachid. I can get a long knife. So all this is within Rav Chizda's version of the brisa, right? So says the Gemara, who's the author of Rav Chizda's brisa? Hamani. Must be Shimon HaTimni. Shimon HaTimni, the Tanya. The shachat has been abakar lifnei Hashem, v'lo hashochet lifnei Hashem. The Tanakama over here holds like our first version of the brisa, that the shochet does not need to be in the same room. Look at Shimon HaTimni's shita. Shimon HaTimni Omer, minayin shehiyu yodav shel shochet lifnei min hanishchat. You need to be in that room with your hands. Talmud lomar v'shachat es ben abakar lifnei Hashem. Shochet es ben abakar yehei lifnei Hashem. Oh, super clear. So Shimon Atimni / Rav Chizda are one camp. Shochet has to be in the room. Our Mishnah is another camp. So therefore, it seems we have a machlokes tanoim as to whether or not we require the shochet to be in the room. According to our Mishnah and the first version of the Brisa that we saw, you do not need to be in the room. Technically speaking, b'diavad by a tameh, you're allowed to use a long knife. No problem. But according to the second version of that Brisa, which is Rav Chizda, and then doubled down by historically backwards, but then quoting Shimon Atimni from a Brisa, we see that he says that shochet es ben abakar yehei lifnei Hashem. So machlokes tanoim. That's kind of how we conclude on the tameh person. What is clear from our Gemara, if we were poskim, and if we paskin from Gemara, which we don't, is that every other person can shech lechatchila. A woman, an ebed, everyone else listed in the Mishnah, no problem. Next, 6-7 lines down on Lamed Beis and Beis. Amar Ula, Amar Reish Lakish, Tameh shehichnis yado lifnim loke. He holds that a tameh who extends his hands into the kodesh place, he gets malkos. Shenemar b'chol kodesh lo siga, and the rest of the pasuk reads ve'el hamikdash lo savo. The Shita Mikubetzes adds that into the Gemara because we're making a hekesh of siga and bia. Makish bia l'negia. Ma negia b'mixas shma negia. Just like if I touch something, it doesn't matter if I touch it with one finger or with one hand or if I put my whole body on it. Tuma transfers with one negia. Af bia b'mixas shma negia shma bia. So too over here, that if you put your hands in the room even a little bit and you're tameh, you're chayiv. We're going to soon see that not everyone reads this line exactly the same way, the Ula line about Reish Lakish. We'll get there. But let's first have a conversation about this line. We're about a quarter of the way down on Lamed Beis Mebez. Eisvei Rav Hoshaya le'Ula. So Ula was the one who said, Tameh shehichnis yado lifnim loke, that a tameh who puts his hands across the threshold is going to get malkos. So says the Gemara, hold on one second. A mitzora shechal shmini shelo lihios be'erev Pesach. The process of a mitzora becoming Torah takes about 8 days, 7 days of nothing, and on the 8th day he gets the Tara process. Bohen yado, he gets all the oil on the right thumb, right big toe, right ear. All that happens on day 8. Listen to this guy's poor luck, okay? On the 8th day, he goes through this whole process. Mitzora shechal shmini, he's going to become tahor that day. Shalolios be'erev Pesach. He'll be good to go for the korban Pesach. And then v'ra kari bo bayom. It's not good. Now he can't come to the mikdash place. You're not allowed to come to the mikdash as a bal kari. So he tried to solve the problem. V'taval. He went to the mikvah. Now what is he called in halacha? A tvul yom. He went to the mikvah. He's just waiting for Harav Shemesh. Amru chachamim. Af al pi she'ein tvul yom acher nichnas. Even though in general, outside of the context of korban Pesach, a tvul yom would never go to the mikdash. Zen nichnas. Listen to the lamdus of the Gemara. Let me get the case clear, and then you're going to hear a beautiful line from the Gemara. We have a guy who is a tvul yom for Keri. Now, he's not supposed to go to the Beis HaMikdash, but if he doesn't bring the korban Pesach, he's also chayiv kares. So we have a tension here. He's a tvul yom, and if he goes, he's chayiv kares. But if he doesn't go, he's chayiv kares. Gemara does not ask that question. That's correct. But look at what the Gemara says. Crazy line. Mutav yavo asay sheyesh bo kares v'yidche asay she'ein bo kares.
Well, the problem is, at the same time,
The knisa, the bia into the building.
you're not Mekayim Pesach.
So because you're thinking of asay dochelosa asay principles. That's not what's happening here. Look at this line again. It's a little different. Yavo asay. Mutav yavo asay sheyesh bo kares. It's better for you to fulfill the mitzvah deoraisa of korban Pesach. V'yidche asay she'ein bo kares. Not los asay. So why does it say it that way? Because it's actually an asay of shiluach tmeim. What? Yeah, you're out. So the Balkari is kicked out from an asay. It's asay sheyesh bo kares is doche an asay she'ein bo kares. So you're not actually chayiv. I think I misspoke earlier. You're not chayiv kares for entering the mikdash space as a balkari. You're
I
just
think that was my mistake.
yeah, that was my comment.
Okay.
I caused that.
So,
So therefore, you're better. Stan, your question stands. I don't know the answer to your question. Great question. Why not push him off until could be? That's a great question. I don't know, but the Gemara doesn't go.
for Tamid, not, he may not qualify for Pesach.
You can't go.
Yeah, but he's not tummy. You're right, but he's not tummy. Right.
We did have a dune a few blot ago that a mechusar kippurim is considered to still be a zav. So I don't know if we applied the same thing by Tzvul Yom, but that would be a svara to say he's still tamei. But the fact that the Gemara doesn't do what you suggested, Stan, is a very good point.
Leave him in Surah first.
Like does or doesn't?
I mean, like, it's not like, why does it matter? It's not just a case where he was a school young, like, doesn't apply there. I feel like they wouldn't be saying it's just about him.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Rashi says 6 lines down, Shechal Shmini Shelo, V'haya lo Hayom Likanes Lahar Habayis. It's his 8th day was Erev Pesach when he'd bring the Korban Pesach. So V'haya lo Hayom Likanes Lahar Habayis, the Chalal Shal Nikanor, Shelo Niskadesh Lahachnis Yado Lebahonos. No. Sorry, you're raising a nuance here. He's still a mitzvah until he has this process done. We have a heter that he can extend his hands for his thumb and his ear and whatever. We have a heter that he can have the Tara process. He's not fully eligible yet on his own either. He couldn't properly, as a mitzvah, go into the mikdash. He can only extend his thumb in and his big toe. It's not regular heter. Now we're laying on top of that a second problem. But there you go. Now we have a second issue. The Gemara is going to deal with this in a moment. But that's a very good question. So the reason why that case was important is because it's not just Tful Yom. He's not yet finished with his Mitzorah process. He needs to stick his thumb out. He needs to put his ear, and he needs to put his big toe out. So, but there's a heter for him to put his hand because the Kohen had to do this bohen yado haymanis bon raglamas, but it had to be done in the Kodesh. So it's literally like the song, put your right thumb. It was really like it's exactly that's what happened. So we had a heter for that, but now we have a complicating factor, which is his balkari. Let's get back to this in a minute because it's going to come up. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, in this regard, Davar Torah, he says, I have to teach you some Torah. Afilu aseh einbo. When it comes to the balkari, there is no aseh by him. Shne'emar, because in the Sefer Divrei Hayamim, the pasuk reads, Vayamod Yehoshaphat b'kal Yehuda v'Yerushalayim b'veis Hashem lifnei hechatzer hachadasha. What's hachatzer hachadasha? My hachatzer hachadasha. Rav Yochanan, that on that day, some say it's not Rav Yochanan, some say that it was Rebbe. Shechichu bo dvarim harbe v'amar tful yom al yikanis l'machne leviyah. The din of a tful yom not being nichnas is not part of the shlichus tmeim from the mikdash. It's exered derabanan from the times of Rebbe or Rav Yochanan, whatever. They didn't live too far apart. They lived about 50, 40 years apart. So that's a machlokes anyways. Now, let's take a diuk out of this whole story. V'i amris bia b'mixas shma bia. And if you want to say that just putting your hands out into the space of the Kodesh is problematic, how is he able to do that? So says the Gemara, after all, Idi v'idi aseh sheyesh bo karesu. For the Mitzorah to go into that space with the Tumah that he has is her kares. You can't go into the Kodesh as a Mitzorah who's Tameh. But the only way he can get out of being a Mitzorah is by putting his hands there, right? So Amar Le says back to him, this is Ula responding to Rav Hoshaya, mitunach, from your question. Mitunach doesn't literally mean your question, it means from your package, but it's like Ula ta'amech, right? It's something from what you're asking, shiny Mitzorah. Hoel v'hutar litzaraso, hutar l'kirio. Here, we stacked these two things together because we have a very unique mechudesh dekadin that once we have a heter for the mitzora to go get tahara by extending his thumb and his foot into the kodesh, we also don't then mind that he's a carry. We stack the two things and we don't mind anymore. I mean, if he was only a Baal carry, we would have said no. And that's not. But if his carry took place at such punk exactly on that morning of Yud Daled Nisan, which was his 8th day of mitzvah, we needed that because otherwise the case of carry would have, otherwise the case would have been obvious. The mitzvah pashut has a heter. That's what the pasuk means. So that's what the Gemara means. And then the Gemara says, let's take this a little bit further. Maybe this idea of, oh, well, he's a mitzvah and he has a heter anyway. Let's throw in another tuma and see how much we can tolerate. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Kosavar Ula, it seems that Ula holds that if there is a time of Ruban Zavin, when most people are Zavin, and then they secondarily become Tamei Meis, V'nasu Tmei Meisim, Hoel V'hutru Tumasan, since there's a heter by the Tuma of the Zav, Hutru Lezivasan, then we also have a heter for their Ziva. This is basically the following. We know that Tuma is Hutru B'tzibor. So if most of Klal Yisrael is Tamei Meis, so you can still bring the Korban. That's what we've learned this many times. So let's say that Rov of Klal Yisrael became Zavim, and then Rov of Klal Yisrael became Tmei Mesim. So the Gemara says, well, your second Tuma Sutra B'tzibor, so therefore I'm going to allow you to bring the Korban even as a Zav. And the Gemara says, that's out of order. You didn't become Tamei Meis first and then tack on Zav. The way you framed your case was that you first became a Zav, and then you look at the case. Amar Rav Yosef, Ruban Zavim, and then V'nasu Tmei Mesim, Hol V'hotru L'tumasan, by the Mesim, therefore Hotru L'zivasan. Amar Le'abaye, Midami, Tuma Ishtaroi. The Tumas Meis, when Rov the Tzibor is Tamei, Ziva, that's a heter, that's a blanket heter that we allow, the Tuma Hotru B'tzibor. But Ziva, Lo Ishtaroi. You got it backwards. You started out with Tuma Ziva. That doesn't work. So Amar Le, Dilma Hachika Amar. Maybe this is really what he meant to say, what Rav Yosef meant to say in the name of Ula. Ruban were first to Mei Mesim, and only afterwards were Nebenasu Zavim, Hol Hutru L'tumasan, Hutru L'zivasan. And that the Gemara accepts. Amar Le, yes, that's in fact what Rav Yosef meant to say. So Lemaisa, what does that mean? We learned a principle in our Gemara about a Mitzorah who became a Baal Keri on his 8th day, the day he was to become Tahor, and then he became a Baal Keri. Then he went to the mikvah, so now he's a Tvul Yom, unfinished Tahara process of the Mitzorah, and he needs to bring a Korban Pesach. How do we make this work? So the Gemara says, no big deal. We have a built-in heter that the Mitzorah, the only way you can become Tahor, stick your thumb out, they pour the oil, and whatever they do. Once you have the heter of Mitzorah, we're going to overlook the concern about Keri. No problem. And that way, he gets Tara from Mitzorah, overrides Keri, and he can bring the Korban Pesach, Shalom Yisrael. He's good to go. So the Tushtel of Rabbi Yosef is, okay, well, what if most of Klal Yisrael became Zavim, and then most of Klal Yisrael became Tmei Mesim? Hoel that Tumas Hutru B'tzibor, you can bring the Korban Pesach, Apal Pi that you're a Zav. So the Gemara says, that would be true, but only if it were to be that you became a Tamei Meis first. And that Rav Yosef accepts that correction. So therefore, had it been that most of Klal Yisrael became Tamei Meis, and then on top of that, they got a lesser Tuma of Zav, still pretty Chamor Tuma, but they got that lesser Tuma of Zav, Halacha L'maisa, they can still bring their Korban Pesach. Big Chiddush. Because Mechatesi that Zav should have ever been mutter by a Korban Pesach. Okay, it's a lesser tuma. We don't even think about these things where most of us are Tamei Meis. We don't even blink about it, right? So the Gemara says, my son was at the Bulls game the other night. This guy coded 2 rows away from my son. Heart compressions. I mean, the guy he died at the Bulls. Yeah, unbelievable Zach. So I asked him, I'm like, was anyone a Kohen from you? Was with a bunch of friends? He's like, no. Otherwise, they'll be Tamei Meis. It's her deresa. I don't know how many people knew about it. Like, yeah.
That's right. 20,000 people in the building.
There's a Kohen in that room. There's a Kohen in that room with season tickets. He's got, hopefully it's by a door, but how often does that happen? Okay, anyways, that's what the Gemara says. Says the Gemara, still I don't agree with you. Vachati lo dami, I don't agree. Mitzora heterahu. Hold Ishtri. The Torah gave us the heter for the Mitzorah. There's pashut no way for the Mitzorah to become Tar without doing this action of putting your hand over the Rubicon into the Kodesh. So he says that hold Ishtri. But Tuma is Dechuyahi. It's only Dechuya. It's not. We don't want it to be that way. It wasn't baked that way. Okay, Nebuch, everybody's tameh, so we'll be makel on the fine. So laha idchia, laha idchai, but laha lo idchai. How can you extend the tumas maze to add in zav? It's too far. The Mitzorah one I get, because the Torah tells us how the Mitzorah has to become Torah. So I'll allow you to override Kerry, no problem. But you can't say the same thing by Tumas Masons up. The exact opposite is true. Mitzorah heteru, I should have said no. Mitzorah is a huge chiddush that someone tummy can go into the mikdash with their hands over the line. Huge chiddush. There you shouldn't have added in the case of Kerry. But by Tuma Hocher B'tzibur, which is a Shas concept, we talk about Tuma Hocher B'tzibur all the time. There, Tuma D'chuyi, Mali Chad D'chuya, Mali Shtei D'chuyos. Who cares at that point? It's already Tuma Hocher B'tzibur. I can hear the Lamdus in both ways. I can hear them both ways. Okay, top of Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph. 7 minutes left officially, but we are not going to make that mark. Michlal, the Gemara says on Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph that Tarvayu Svirlu Tuma D'chuyi B'tzibur. It does definitely seem that Rava and Rabbi Yosef and everyone in our Gemara seems to hold that Tuma is Dechuya hi b'tzibur. We don't really talk about that much more. The Gemara kind of accepts that, and then we move on to something else, but it is important to know that we hold Tuma is Hutra b'tzibur. Lema misayele, perhaps we have a support for something that we've learned. We need Rashi for this because the Gemara doesn't tell us what we're talking about. Rashi, Lema misayele, 6 lines down, Le'ula, to Amar bia b'miksas shma bia. Maybe we have a Mari Makom that supports the idea that partially putting one's body into the Kodesh is as if you're standing with your whole body in the Kodesh. Kol hasmichos shahayu sham, for all the cases where one had to do smicha on an animal. Kore alehen ani, and some gear says change it back to normal Hebrew. Kore ani alehem techef lesmicha shchita. That we need to have an immediacy between smicha and shchita, which means right after I press down on the animal with my weight, I put my hands on his head and I press down, immediate shchita. So says the Gemara, there's only one exception. Chutz mizu, Rashi says mizu is shel asha mitzora, the korban that a mitzora brings. That can happen because the mitzora is only allowed in that space just by extending his hands over, right? He can't go in that room. So except for him, Shahayisa b'shar Nikanor, he was at the door by Shar Nikanor. She'ein mitzor yachol likanis l'sham ad shemazan alei midam chatas midam hashama. That catch 22. Until you shech the animal, he can't go anywhere. But if he needs to do smicha, it's cyclical. He can't get into the room. So where do you do smicha? You must do smicha out of the room. So says the Gemara, V'i amris bia b'mixas lo shma bia. If you want to say that putting your fingers over the line, your hands over the line, is not like going in the mikdash, then you should have done smicha on the spot. Le'oil yadei v'lismoch. Elamai, must be that Ula's right. That's why it says lema misayele. This brisa, which tells us that a mitzora cannot do smicha until the korban is brought, therefore he can't do smicha in that space at all. They move it out to wherever he is by Shar Nikanor. That shows us that bia b'mixas is shma bia, because we don't allow him to do smicha. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Hamani, who is this? It's really Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Merchak Tzafon. He says, no problem, it's Merchak Tzafon. We learned about this many blot ago. I was going to draw a whole picture, but remember we had a machlokas between Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda as to what Tzafon is defined as. So let's say that, right, the picture in Rashi on the Amud Aleph, on the bottom right of the Amud Aleph. So there we have, let's say that this is my Gemara is the Mizbeach. And let's say that, I don't want to say that any of these things are the Heichal. Here's the Chumash. So let's say we have our Heichal over here. So according to all Shitas, if this is the end of the Mizbeach, everything from over here is considered north. According to some other Amoraim, other Tanaim, so is this space over here in between. And according to Rebbe, even the column on the other side of the Mizbeach, but still north of the Mizbeach. So a 3-way machlokas Tanaim. I don't remember the name of the third Tana. It was Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, Rebbe, and Shimon, I don't remember exactly this. Okay, we can look, whatever the case may be. So it says the Gemara, well, he was standing at Shar Nikanor. So that must be that he holds like the Shita, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. Oh, yeah, the Amar Merchak Tzafon. Says the Gemara, Veli Avid Pishpesh. Well, why don't we make a door? Make a little, as what Rashi says. A Pishpesh, Rashi says 2/3 of the way down, 5 lines into the line. Upirusho Pesach Katan. Kidam Maseches Shkalim. Mizrach Bishar Nikanor Ushne Pishpeshin Hayulo Echad Mimina Vechad Ismalo. Okay, fine. So it says the Gemara, why didn't we make a door for the Mitzorah so that Tekef L'Smicha Shchita? Bring it so that he's doing the smicha in the right spot, approximately, and then they do shchita right away. So if there's a door, let's say this was the wall, and I'm right now in my north space, put a door right there for the mitzorah to stand in, take the animal outside, he'll do smicha, bring it in right away, do shchita right away. You can do that. Why didn't we do that? Amar Abaye v'Rava Damri Tarvayu, they both agreed on this one. You know what you don't do after the architectural plans are finished? You don't mess with the architectural plans. And the Gemara says, just like that. The Gemara says, quoting a pasuk in Divrei Yamim, "Hakol bichsav miyad Hashem alai hiskil kol malachos hatavnis." The building is built. You're not making an extra door unless you are allowed to make an extra door. No heter.
After the fact, way after. This isn't, it's not in the.
No, but this is.
The Tikkun Gadol one says.
But this is different. This is opening a door that has access to the Mizbeach.
It's bigger.
It's bigger because it's Ezra's Kohanim. It's Ezra's Kohanim. Yeah. So, yeah. Where was that Gemara? In Yuma? Sukkah? It's a good thing you guys are here. I just would have said Yuma. Yeah, sure. So that's what the Gemara says. Answer number one is yes, in theory, you could have made a door, but we don't mess with architectural plans. Ika de Amre, some say that Rav Yosef's comment was a little different. Amar Rav Yosef, kol hasomech rosho v'rubo machnis. That when you're doing smicha, your whole body actually needs to be in the room. My taima, because kol kocho ba'inan hilkach lo efshar. You can't extend your hands over, not because, going back to where we started, the Lema Mesele, not because of Bia B'Mixas is Shema. No, not because of that. The reason why we didn't allow it is because you can't do smicha with only your hands. You need your weight. You need to lean in on the animal, which means you need to be in the same room as the animal. So we can't make a diuk about Bia B'Mixas because the limiter on the smicha was that I need your whole body in there. Not enough space. Then the Gemara says, My kasavar. Not exactly connected to what we were talking about, so we have to use Rashi. Rashi's halfway through the wide lines. Dibur hamaschil u'maika sabar. Hai tana de amar kol hasmichos tzrichos tekef l'smicha shchita chutz mizu. So that's the Mishnah at the top of the page. According to the Shita that says that in general we need smicha right before shchita, with the exception of Mitzorah, as we pointed out, because it's impossible for him to do that because he needs to do smicha on the asham. And the asham is his heter to go into the mikdash. So except for him, we do hold tekef l'smicha shchita. So says the Gemara halfway down. Ika savar smichas asham mitzorah deoraisa. If you hold that for the mitzorah to do smicha is a din deoraisa, and if you hold v'tekef l'smicha shchita deoraisa as well, then you should just use the Torah's heter and let the mitzorah into that room even when he's tummy. Leol v'lismoch lehedja derachmana amar. If we have a din d'oraisa that the asham requires smicha, and if we have a din d'oraisa of tekef l'smicha shchita, that's the Torah basically saying, I know you're a tamei mitzorah, but there's no choice. This is how you become a tahor yid again. So maybe we should just let him in. So says the Gemara, it's a really good svara. And answer number one is we really would have done that, but we have a rabbinic concern. We're afraid that he might take too many steps in that room. Then this goes to show a dakus in the iser of a tameh walking in the Ezra's Kohanim. Extra steps are chayiv kares. Rashi, halfway down, shema yarbe b'psios, la'achar shesamach, imikones psia letzad pnim, yoser mishahayat tzarech, nimtza anush kares. Unbelievable how... Yeah, the new barriers. Yeah.
You pass over the.
Yeah, absolutely. There will be absolutely. Unfortunately, irrelevant mashal. Yeah. So the Gemara says that the Gemara's first Rav Ada bar Masna's answer is, you're right. The Torah was matir the mitzvah to go in there, but it's dangerous. Second answer, Ikada Amre, Amar of Ada bar Masna, Smichas Asha Mitzora is taka de oraisa. But the din of v'tekev l'smicha shchita is lav de oraisa. Same person, just Ikada Amres. The first version was, I agree with you, both are dine de oraisa. The Asha Mitzora needs smicha and tekev l'smicha shchita. He should be allowed to go in the Mitzora. He should be allowed to go into the Ezras Kohanim. We don't allow it because of psios. The second answer is no. Only the smicha is a din d'oraisa, but takef l'smicha shchita is a din d'rabanan. And therefore, we could never allow the Mitzorah to walk in there. Forget about psios. That's not even a relevant conversation point. So machlokes between himself and himself, because it's two versions of himself. I, says the Gemara, meisvei v'samach v'shachat, masmicha b'tehorin, af shchita b'tehorin. We saw this already, that if we know we have this hekesh in the pasuk of smicha and shchita, and masmicha is with tar, so to the shochet. V'i amris, and if you want to say that takef l'smicha shchita is lav deoraisa, b'tmeyin nami mishkachas la, then we should have the same scenario in regards to tmeyin. Rashi, b'tmeyin nami isa shesomech bachutz umachnisa tahor lifnim v'shochet. We should be able to find a way for this to happen, where a tameh can do shchita. Says the Gemara, ela epuch. We need to change this around. It's not like we said. Neither of the answers of Rav Ada bar Masna are correct. Says the Gemara, ela epuch. Smichus asha mitzora is lav de oraisa. Meaning, against the two approaches we just said, this is our third approach. Really, the smicha of an asham is not a din de oraisa. But takef l'smicha shchita is a din de oraisa. So what do you do in a case like this? You do the best you can. Well, because smicha asham is of the mitzvah is not a din d'oraisa, okay, Nebuch, he'll do as best he can. What do you want him to do? He's not allowed in the room, so they do it out of the room. That's what the Gemara says. Turning to the top of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, probably about 5 to 7 more minutes. Ravina Omar le'inyan malchus itmar. Ravina is going back on Ula's comment. Rashi says at the top of the page, Ravina Amar, Hada Amar Ula le'el mishmei deresh lakish bebiya mixas. That line, when he said, if you put your hands in, it's biya b'mixas is considered biya mamish, that means you get malkos. That's what the Gemara says. Ki Ravin Amar Rabbi Abo le'inyan tamei shenaga b'kodesh itmar. No, that he says we were talking about, the malkos issue was talking about if you touch something in the kodesh, that you get malkos. To itmar. We saw this in Maseches Malkos. Tameh, if you have a person who's tameh shenaga b'kodesh, Resh Lakish Amar loke, Rav Yochanan Amar eino loke. Let's get into their rationale. Let's just get the case clear. A tameh person touched kodesh food, a kodesh korban. Resh Lakish says you get malkos Amar loke. Why? Because the pasuk says b'chol kodesh lo siga. That sounds pretty clear. We have a clear law that you're not allowed to touch something when you're tameh. Rav Yochanan Amar eino loke, because that pasuk of b'chol kodesh lo tiga hahu b'trumaksiv. And you can't create a punishment outside of that pasuk because ein onshin min adin. We would have had to make a gzeira shava from the world of truma out to our case of tameh shenaga b'kodesh, and that's not allowed. So he rejects the possibility of using the pasuk b'chol kodesh lo tiga. Then the Gemara asks on Reish Lakish, the pasuk b'chol kodesh lo siga you wanted to use for tameh shenaga b'kodesh? Hai kra lahachi hu de'asa. Is that what the pasuk is really for? Hai mi boile azhar la'ochel basar kodesh. No, the pasuk of b'chol kodesh lo siga was needed as the azhara, as the warning, as the lav for eating basar kodesh. The itmar. Where do we see that this pasuk is being used for something totally different? Rish Lakish tried to use it for our case of tameh shenaga b'kodesh. Says the Gemara, you can't do that. A third of the way down to itmar. Azhar la'ochel basar kodesh minayin. How do we know, from where do we know that we have a lav of eating basar kodesh when you're tameh? Reish Lakish himself quotes the same pasuk. Reish Lakish Amar b'chol kodesh lo siga. 5 lines ago, you tried to use it to teach me the din of tamei shenaga b'kodesh. Now you're saying it's azhara lechol basar kodesh. Make up your mind. You can't use the same pasuk for 2 different things. And Rav Yochanan Amar Tani Bardala, something totally different. Asya tumaso tumasami bias mikdash. Malahalan anush v'hizir. Afkan anush v'hizir. Over there, when it comes to eating meat while tamei, that is being compared to entering the mikdash while tamei. And in both of those cases, it's problematic. So the answer to the question of where do we learn the azhara for ochel basar kodesh, Rav Yochanan learns it from tumaso. The question that remains is, how in the world did Reish Lakish use the same exact pasuk for 2 things? So it says the Gemara, tamei shenaga b'kodesh. When we talk about a tamei person who touches food that's kodesh, mida afka rachmana b'lashon negia. That's clear. B'chol kodesh lo siga. Don't touch the food. We get it. Azhara la'ochel mida iskesh kodesh lemikdash. So all of this is within Rav Yochanan still. And the answer is that we see a hekesh between kodesh and mikdash. Tanya Kavase de Reish Lakish. We have a raya for Reish Lakish. 5 lines from the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. What's the raya for Reish Lakish? What's the brisa? B'chol kodesh lo siga azhara la'ochel. Ata omer azhara la'ochel oenu ela l'nogeya. So that b'chol kodesh lo siga, that doesn't even say eating. It says touching. Yet we say it's for ochel. Maybe it's only for negia. Tamal omer b'chol kodesh lo siga v'le mikdash lo savo. We have a hekesh. Makish kodesh le mikdash. Ma mikdash davar sheyesh bo netilas neshama. Just like if a person were to go into the mikdash in the incorrect way, there would be netilas neshama. What does Rashi say? Kares. Af kodesh. So too, if you eat betuma, davar sheyesh bo netilas neshama. This is the brisa that supports the shita Reish Lakish. The ibn ogeya, but it can't be that just touching the food would be chayiv kares. The ibn ogeya netilas neshama miika, which is an interesting zach. We have things that are lesser, but still we would say that it's going to be problematic. But we don't say that touching something would be chayiv kares. Ella, it must be be'achila. About 6 or 7 more lines. We'll stop at the word gufa. The akati mi boile Reish Lakish still needs that pasuk for a 3rd thing. He answered up already from the hekesh, no problem. But v'akati mi boile Reish Lakish needs the pasuk of b'chol kodesh lo siga l'tamei she'achal basar kodesh lifnei zrika. This wasn't discussed yet. But if he eats the meat before zrika, if a tamei person eats kodesh meat before the zrika was done, so they did the shchita, they cut off a piece of meat, a rib, and they cooked it on the grill, and he ate it before Zrikas Hadam was done. To Itmar, Tamish Shachal Basar Kodesh Lifnei Zrika, Reish Lakish Amar Loke, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Eino Loke, Reish Lakish Amar Loke from the same pasuk, B'chol Kodesh Lo Siga. You are milking this pasuk for a 3rd thing. How is that even possible? Lo Shna Lifnei Zrika, Lo Shna Lachar Zrika. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Eino Loke, Kidetani Bar Lila, Asya Tumaso Tula. So you don't get Malkos. We're not going to go into this drasha now, but we saw it on the bottom of the previous page. And that was written after Zrika. So the pasuk's not even available for Reish Lakish. So says the Gemara, that's not true. Imkain lemakra ba kodesh, my bechol kodesh. We have a language of deviation. It should have said ba kodesh, but it didn't. It said bechol kodesh. Shma mina says Reish Lakish. I can learn multiple things out of this pasuk because it should have said ba kodesh. What's bechol kodesh? It'll teach me a bunch of things. It's going to teach me about eating meat before Zrika, and it's going to teach me about tamei shenaga b'kodesh. And the 3rd case, which we learned toward the bottom of the page, that I can answer through a hekesh. And that's how Reish Lakish wriggles out of everything. We'll stop right here. Emir Hashem, tomorrow night, Rabbi Handler will pick up right here at the word gufa. I already told him where he's starting from. He's ready to go. Emir Hashem, he'll learn about 4 blot with you, and we'll be all caught up by the time I get back on Tuesday. I will not be here tomorrow night, but he will. Wishing you all a beautiful night.